with the new strategy of the Trump administration. I don't know if you can call it a strategy. The new move of the Trump administration about Iran. They're trying to bankrupt Iran. Basically, they're thinking of this blockade, putting tremendous pressure economically. And Scott Bessent just 2 days ago said that they're going to bring a lot of pressure that no one has ever experienced before. Here is what he said. I want to know, what is your understanding? What is the next plan? What are they thinking of? Here is what he said.
Epic fury to economic fury. And at the president's orders, we have raised the level even again. And watch this space for more announcements coming next week, because we are going to apply measures like have never been seen in the history of economic isolation on a country. And
yeah, what do you make of the economic isolation? To my understanding, there is nothing left for Iran to be isolated. They're literally isolated, totally, 100%. What is your understanding of what they're planning to do?
Well, first, Nima, I don't know what they're planning to do because I'm not an insider. But you can, if you watch these things evolve over time, you can put the pieces together. And what it amounts to, it's more weaponization of the U.S. dollar financial system. And they've weaponized it, as you indicate, vis-a-vis Iran at the max. So I don't know what they intend to impose further, maybe secondary weaponizations of some sort. But the point is, this is a disastrous policy for the United States, because it has negative blowback, unintended consequences. When you weaponize the dollar, you are obviously making enemies of whoever is on the other side of that weaponization and receiving the hits from it. But you're also making the dollar less attractive. You're incentivizing other parties to try to figure out some alternative system to use to get away from the US dollar. And this is contrary to what Bessent's trying to do. He's trying to get more people to use the US dollar. They're promoting things like stable coins that are dollar based, where the stable coin issues a token, and that token is backed up, at least theoretically, by a very high percentage of US dollar denominated government bonds. So that means that the company that's involved with the issuance of tokens, the stable coin company, has to go to the US Treasury, or actually go to the dealers and buy US bonds. And that's what Bessent wants to do. And why does he want to do that? He wants to keep the demand for Treasury bonds high.
Yeah. It seems that we've lost Steve. Can you hear me, Steve?
So this is...
Yeah, we've lost him. He's going to get back. And basically what we're going to focus today is about the economy, because the question right now is, what else can they do to put pressure on the Iranian government? What the Iranian government said, and they repeated in the last 4 days, they're ready. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, okay. So everything is geared off these government bonds, the 10-year being the key one, and the interest rate is already over. It's about 4.7%, and Bessent's red line is about 4.5%. So he's already over the red line. It's too high. Now what's the implication of this thing? Number one, that means mortgages are high in the United States. They're higher than they've been since the great financial crisis started in 2008, and the housing market is in the tank in the United States. It's a real problem. There are many more sellers than buyers right now. It's reached a high level, the relationship between sellers and buyers, with many more sellers than buyers. And it's because of these high mortgage rates. The other thing is government finances, because to roll over the government debt and finance the deficits that we're in right now, and we're in those deficits in part because we're at a war with Iran that cost a lot of money. So that increases the deficit. Well, you have to finance that some way. You issue treasury bills to do it. And if the interest rate is high, of course, obviously it costs you more. And this is significant because 35% of all personal income taxes collected in the United States, 35% of those taxes go just to service debt, just to pay interest. So Besant, I think, is just out of school from a technical point of view. As a principle, by the way, I'm completely opposed to sanctions and tariffs, quotas, anything like that. Anything interfering with freedom of trade, I'm opposed to, as a matter of principle. And as a matter of practice, I can make arguments like I just made to you that it's just bad policy from a practical point of view. It has all kinds of costs associated with it.
Yeah. What do you make of Saudi Arabia and the continuation of the war, and they're somehow doubling down with the case of Yemen? Instead of talking, instead of finding a practical solution for what's going on, they're doubling down. Do you think is it coming from the Trump administration? Somehow, if we assume that Donald Trump is supporting that, how is that going to be logical if you have the Strait of Hormuz closed and you bring the Bab al-Mandab, tremendous pressure, double into the pressure on the global market? And even if they're not, let's assume Donald Trump is supporting that, because he said that Axios reported Donald Trump is supporting whatever Saudi Arabia is doing. But the question is how much of the policies they're making in Saudi Arabia is based on the relationship they have with the United States, and how much of it is based on what's going on inside the country and with the economy of the country. The reason that I'm bringing that up is the new defense pact between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan, which is something different. And the region is somehow experiencing new things that are happening. We don't know basically what are the reasons, but these new things are the outcome of what has happened so far. The American, the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran, the Iranian retaliations, and the repercussions of those attacks, which is the war between, in my opinion, Saudi Arabia and Yemen. How do you see this complexity of issues and interests in that region?
Well, the word complexity with a capital C is what you really want to get at, because and you said the other word is logic with a capital L, and when you get into the Trump administration, Trump himself, it's what I call pretzel logic. There is no linear logic to it's all twisted and doesn't make any sense. It's just like the thing we were talking about with Secretary Besant. Besant wants to weaponize the US dollar even more vis-a-vis Iran. We don't know exactly how he's going to do that, but he says he wants to do it. But that's counter to all of his overall objectives of keeping the interest rates down in the United States. So it doesn't make any sense. It's contradictory. My own view is that I'm certain that Trump administration is encouraging the Saudis to attack the Houthis. And by the way, maybe one reason for that, the U.S. tried to attack them and they didn't do anything. They failed remember, there was a huge effort to wipe out the Houthis, and the U.S. and Israel engaged in that, and they failed. So you have an enemy of Saudi Arabia, Israel. They would like the Saudis to attack the Houthis, and the U.S. probably would like to have an attack. From the Saudis' point of view, I think it's not a very prudent thing to be doing, to tell you the truth. It's like, I think I mentioned to you maybe the last time we talked, or maybe offline, but I remember when I was a boy growing up on the farm, and I'd go up in the haymow of the barn, and my uncle would always say, now don't fool around with the hornets that are up there, because you're going to get stung. And it's the same with the Houthis with me. You don't fool around with the Houthis or you're going to get stung. It's a losing proposition for the Saudis. And by the way, the Saudis are very vulnerable. I mean, that pipeline they have running into the Red Sea, I'm sure the Houthis could take that thing out. Or let's put it this way, there's a high probability that pipeline is very vulnerable, and other oil facilities in Saudi Arabia are vulnerable, and that's the lifeblood of Saudi Arabia. So why would you want to put those facilities in harm's way by getting into a fight with the Houthis? You just leave the Houthis alone. Leave them alone in Yemen. What's the? I don't understand the logic behind the thing at all. That's why I say it's all, as you say, confused, very hard to figure out who's doing what to who, and another thing, who's lying to who. You know, you're in a region where, you know, whatever happens, you have to put what I call a lie factor into the picture. And remember what the lie factor, where that came from. In the old days in the Soviet Union, when you looked at Soviet statistics, you had to insert a lie factor to adjust the official number to what you think would be realistic. So everything, we are in a war now on top of it, by the way. So this is a general problem in that part of the world, the lie factor. But it becomes a very big factor during a war.
I assume that with the case of, I'm sure that you've heard about Abraham Lincoln and what has happened with aircraft carrier, which was the problem with food supply, and these forces for many days being on on the aircraft carrier without having any access to the port and going to the ports. And the New York Times reported that the supply problem on Abraham Lincoln was because of the Iranian strikes that destroyed the majority of the U.S. Navy logistics infrastructure in Bahrain, UAE, and Oman, and that's the reason they're experiencing these sort of shortages and problems. On the other hand, they're replacing the aircraft carrier with the new one. That doesn't mean that they're going to change the situation with Bahrain and UAE and Oman. We know that those days are, Iran has destroyed many of these facilities in these countries. But with the continuation of the blockade, looking at the blockade, what are the possibilities of this blockade? Is that enough, or they're thinking of some sort of land blockade all around Iran? And how viable is that choice if they decide to do that?
Well, I think before I answer that question directly, this is where you put the lie factor in, because we have the U.S. government saying, oh, it's not a problem on that aircraft carrier, Abraham Lincoln. It's not a problem. Well, it's obviously a problem. It's just a lie. They're lying about everything. That is one thing people have to get through their head. It's the lie and the lie factor. So they clearly have a huge problem, and you've got about 5,000 military personnel on that aircraft carrier. I mean, it's like a small town, you know, though, in a very confined space, and the reporting that, you know, the bathrooms don't work properly, and you've had food contamination and all sorts of things. And as you point out, if you can't go to port easily, you have a problem. So this gets to your question, the sustainability. What if the Iranians and the Houthis knock out a lot of porting facilities and make it much more difficult from a logistical point of view to be resupplying and everything? So that throws into question. Then the other thing, what about the counterattack? Because let's look at Russia for a minute. Now, Russia, the Ukrainians have been harassing and hitting the Russian shadow fleet pretty hard. We know that because the Western media reports every little thing the Ukrainians do to the Russians, it gets reported. Everything the Russians do to the Ukrainians, well, that's selectively reported, let's put it that way. So you have a huge spin going on with the reporting. But the order has been given now, the Russians will capture Western vessels. So that's the counterattack. So in the Iranian thing, well, what's the counterattack? The assumption is you're going to put a blockade on, make it tighter or something, and that the Iranians and their allies will do nothing. They'll sit there, do nothing. It's stupid. They'll counterattack. And they've shown in these recent events over the past few months that they're pretty effective at counterattacking. And the results of their counterattacks haven't really been reported in the Western press. But if you read carefully, what do you find? You find that the military bases the U.S. has in that region have really taken tremendous damage. So the answer to that is we don't know exactly how sustainable it would be. But if I was advising, just off the top of my head, I would say there are a lot of risks that this won't work and it won't be sustainable. And it might actually put us in a worse position than we are now. Because every one of these military operations, by the way, the U.S. is engaged in with Iran, they've ended up worse after the escalation than before the escalation. And that's why you have now what? Iran is making all kinds of demands on the United States. Before the escalations, it was the other way around. The U.S. was demanding this, demanding that, demanding that, demanding that. Now, the main thing they started talking about was nuclear enrichment. That's not even on the table anymore. The Iranians have all kinds of things. Give us the $300 billion you stole from us, and then we'll talk to you, you know. So from an economic point of view, it's very interesting for me because now clearly the Iranians have the strong hand, and they're making all kinds of economic demands as preconditions to doing anything. As preconditions, basically, to even come to the table. Now, that's very smart from the Iranian point of view. Who would go to a negotiating table if you thought while you were negotiating something, you were going to get bombed? That's happened 2 times to the Iranians, and they finally learned their lesson. From the Iranian point of view, I would never go to a negotiation with the Trump administration until all kinds of preconditions were met. And they've indicated that, well, they're in no rush. Maybe they'll just wait until Trump's term runs out and wait till the next president comes and then decide what they're going to do. But this is a matter of trust, by the way. If you lose trust in somebody, it's pointless to negotiate. If you and I are negotiating something, Nima, and you don't trust me. Why would you waste your time talking to me? Or you would have to do it under some, if you didn't trust me, you'd have to have some precondition that would have to be in there, some guarantee that if negotiations fell apart, you'd get paid some kind of premium or something like that, you see.